Hello guys, TKG here for your comfortable LostArk life. In this video, I'd like to cover the update and improvements of the LostArk KL. As the KL region update progression are quite slightly ahead than the global, so I thought it'd be great to share some of those infos for your LostArk journey. Now follow me, I'll share what I need. Today, I'm going to cover the discussion and issues that are currently happening in the Korean region. In fact, you can think of this video as a continuation of the previous one. Most of the issues being discussed in the community right now are quite depressing. To be honest, the overall atmosphere in the Korean community is not very good right now. First, let's take a look at the update of LostArk since the recent start of Season 3. In fact, the sudden start of Season 3 has raised players' expectation and concern, and at the same time, it has also amplified many users' dissatisfaction with the current disappointing policies and measures of LostArk. In fact, the policies and update implemented so far can be considered a complete disaster. These update policies have not only discouraged dedicated players who have steadily shown affection for the game, but also favored salmok or rice farmers, those known as among Western players. As a result, and I honestly never thought I'd say this, the in-game economy has been significantly disrupted. Especially the current LostArk has mostly chosen the easy way out rather than solving a series of problems in-game. As shown in the previous video, they tried to solve this structural problem through the paid packages. The problem is that players are disappointed with the fact that these packages are sold without any in-game solutions. As I mentioned earlier, but the problem is that even if these packages are sold, the value of materials is surprisingly maintained because the supply of in-game materials has been literally drastically reduced. That is why this fatal problem eventually occurs. Since players cannot solve the problem on their own in the game itself, in the end, players are forced to buy paid package to level up a certain level. At the same time, they left the multi-account passive end characters, or known as rice farming, as it was. In other words, they mass-produced what were often called 1640 character accounts in the community. And the amount of gold that they had become too much contributed greatly to the rapid increase in the value of other contents. In simple terms, it became impossible for general users to afford the ridiculously high prices of gems or relic engraved books. At the same time, it is true that the prices of other contents such as advanced stoning, transcendence, and karma was also quite burdensome. Given this situation, many users naturally created the same class to endure the high prices of contents, creating a new player class called the Nice Done. Simply put, even people who had raised many and various characters in the past could not afford these expensive builds and ended up creating multiple identical characters to support one main character. This is because now they had to farm gold with multiple characters while revolving expensive contents to support the progression cost of these main characters. The LostArk team, who were late to recognize these phenomenon, took the worst possible approach to solving this problem. They sold paid packages again. Rather than increasing the supply of in-game materials or rewards, as mentioned earlier, they decided to focus their policies on a way that would squeeze players even more. This solution ultimately resulted in doubly lowering the value of in-game goods and materials. The so-called updates that the community refers to as deceiving players ended up creating a phenomenon where people would stay away from the game for a certain period of time. And at the same time, there was still a long time left until the last act, so people who already had enough bills were trying to downgrade these contents, especially the gems. The director's comment about the gem system at that time were considered as an act of deceiving people who had already paid real money for these expensive contents. And as people who were tired of this LostArk style patch sold off their gem in large quantities. So finally, the LostArk's economy was seriously damaged. The current policy direction of LostArk has the biggest problem. It is that the updates are being made in a direction that completely ignores and deceives the actual efforts of the players. In fact, when I talk about the game, I don't usually say things like, this is how the game economy is, or this should be like this. It's because I think the game should be enjoyed as a game, and that's right. Nevertheless, the biggest problem with the current direction of LostArk's update is that it is hostile to all players. Especially the players should have given the minimum preferential treatments to that many efforts they had made in the game, or at least to those who spend a lot of money. The recent series of updates have made general players sick of the game, and at the same time the value of many contents has decreased rapidly. In fact, the ridiculous price that I showed you earlier should gradually decrease in price or value. Is natural for the price to naturally decrease as the quantities of material continue to accumulate. But the problem is that the rates of decrease is very fast, especially if you are someone who directly or indirectly paid real money to buy these contents. This is even more frustrating. Just like me, the contents that show the most obvious example of this decline is gems. Their values has plummeted in just 3 months. Just like my stocks. The current losses for all Tier 4 level 8 gem players and level 10 gem players are as follows. Here's the catch. Even players with the typical build, say level 8 gems, are lost this value. If you were to try to make up for this loss with gold, it would take about 12 weeks for a level 1700 characters. Of course, let me add that the price of gem is still declining and the value of gold is also declining. So, that means if you sell now, leave the game, and come back about 3 months later, you can make a similar or better build for less money than the guy was playing the game steadily. To put it simply, to quote the phrase that's been cycling around in the community, you've been working hard on daily contents for a month. I'll buy that effort. Here's the $10. Moreover, I think that the decline in the value of gem mentioned above will continue in the future, because the fundamental causes have not yet been fixed. Needless to say, they are still decided to supply more gems with the paid packages. Given this situation, many players are quite dissatisfied with the current update policy of LostArk. Furthermore, players who have invested money and time in the past are also dissatisfied. And those who have been playing the game hard and keeping up with the in-game goods and materials are also expressing dissatisfaction. And this vicious cycle continues. Moreover, the true of LostArk value, which are shown detailed in offsite, has become so clear that many people are at standstill in most of the contents. As mentioned earlier, the value of daily contents is so minimal that I heard that most users are simply filling up their rest meter again, rather than steadily enjoying the contents to earn in-game materials and currency. In fact, a reason why the community is worsening right now is because of the LostArk team's response. Many people are disappointed and express their dissatisfaction, but LostArk had not announced any specific response or countermeasures. Surprisingly, the part that was mentioned in the last live stream has become a promise that may or may not be fulfilled. Nevertheless, one of the reasons why users are still holding on many is because of the sunk cost. After investing so much money and time, and is a bit reluctant to just leave. In fact, if it was the former director, there would have been some level of expectation, but now the fact that there is no such atmospheres seems to be a more serious problem. Also, the Thermine update was a raid that was attractive enough to inspire a sense of challenge, but the raid that have been added so far, namely the Kazeros raid Act 1 to 3, are somewhat less appealing. In fact, I think one of the biggest reasons for these numerous complaints is that many people's will have been broken down. Expectations for the last act have already gone, and at the same time, the direction and policy update that seems to be deceive players who play the game passionately have brought hurts and disappointment to users rather than a better tomorrow. And if they are going to update, I hope they solve one by one quickly. I'm so frustrated that I don't know how long they are going to just watch. And I hope they change the direction of policy that squeezes users as soon as possible. In a way, this toxic community atmosphere was created by the current LostArk itself. I hope they do a good job of cleaning up this time and come back with good update direction and policy. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. And always, thanks for your big support. Hope this video was still in help for your LostArk journey. And of course, if you like my videos, hit the sub for more upcoming infos. I'll come back with more useful infos in the next video.